Well, I would like to thank everyone for joining us very, very early this morning. Like many of you, I rolled out of bed at about 5, and so I know that many of you have started a long day already, but we are appreciative that you're starting it with us. On behalf of the Broward Workshop, thank you for joining us at the 14th Annual State of the County Forum, our very first in 2 years. I'm Juliette Rolak, Chair of the Broward Workshop. Thank you. At this time, I would like to have everyone rise and welcome the Broward County Color Guard Gator Battalion representing Everglades High School in Miramar. They're led by Lieutenant Colonel Spielvogel. The Color Guard will present the national colors. This year, Command Sergeant Major Nazarino will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and Josie Escobar of Everglades High School will sing the national anthem. Please give them your attention. Thank you.
Color Guard, attention! And read colors. March. Color Guard. Left face. Color salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet waved o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you.
And colors. Right face. Forward, march.
Well, thank you. I don't know about you, but I am so inspired with the great example of our youth and the composure Josie had. Thank you. So a little bit about the workshop, and they say a picture paints 1,000 words. The Broward Workshop was established just over 40 years ago in 1981, and they say a picture paints 1,000 words, so we would like you to watch this brief video to get an inside view of our unique organization and membership. Video roll, please.
The pandemic was a challenge to everyone. What the Broward Workshop did that was fantastic was we kept our pedal to the metal, we kept true to our goals, even in a situation where we couldn't meet in person.
We didn't miss a beat. Every single meeting stayed on track. We just did it virtually.
Relationships matter. And Broward Workshop was able to help improve our community, help provide wisdom to all the leaders who had to make decisions.
The Broward Workshop is a group of like-minded individuals, the top decision makers of companies in Broward County.
Men and women from all types of businesses, from every background.
I love being part of the Broward Workshop. I'm a member of a lot of organizations, and I think without a doubt, this is the one that makes the biggest difference in just about everything.
Every year, the workshop members look at all the goals collectively. The 5 top goals this year are transportation.
By bringing stakeholders together, building camaraderie, the crossing of the new river as it relates to commuter rail. We're laser focused on making it happen. We passed the surtax in 2018, and each year we have about a $350 to $375 million investment to make this community better.
The other goal is education, to focus on Broward Up.
Education Committee understood after some investigation, graduation outcome is directly tied to 3rd grade reading metrics, and we sought to align ourselves with the initiatives and programs that supported that critical issue so we could better prepare our students for life after graduation.
The Community Resilience Committee is focused on sea level rise, the Central and South Florida study, and the Coral Reef study. Representative Robin Bartleman pushed forward House Bill 513, which did give funding for the Central and South Florida study. Without the Broward Workshop, I don't think it would have happened as quickly. The letters of support that we're able to gain from the business and local community are absolutely important in moving forward these initiatives.
Technology Committee is also focused on building the Broward technology ecosystem. The last goal is that the urban core is working with the city and the county both toward getting Joint Government Center on track.
Housing affordability is a key issue in Broward County. It's not just a quality of life issue, it is in fact a growing business advocacy issue. The question is, where are all of our service industry workers going to live? What the Broward Workshop brings to the table is access and the leverage of the relationships of its members.
I've been a member of Broward Workshop 30 years, and I can say every year I think we've gotten better and better.
This organization has an incredible staff, and it also has incredible leaders that are committed to the community.
We're making real changes.
We understand that if we lead and help the county move forward, that helps our businesses, it helps our employees, and it helps our community. No brainer.
An organization like the Broward Workshop only remains relevant if its members are committed to making a difference in the community. And I have total confidence that they're willing to forge forward so that our community is better in the future than it is today.
Well, thank you. I hope that you now have a little greater insight into who we are, what we do, and why we do what we do. You know, the State of the County is our signature annual event. And we have hosted it here at the Signature Grand for several years. So I'd like to take a moment to thank one of our very own workshop members, Arlene Pecora, who's the CEO of Signature Grand, for the tremendous job that she and her team does to make this a very special event. And of course, we're always so delighted to have many of our local business community, nonprofit agency, and civic leaders join us. Of course, we have several dignitaries and elected officials here this morning, so much so that we have to recognize them by category. So I would like to do that. So when I do read your category, I'm going to ask that you do please stand to be recognized so the audience can see you. First, we will begin by state representatives and senators. Mayor Michael Udine and the Broward County Commission and our County Administrator, Monica Sapero. City mayors, city commissioners, and city managers. Broward School Superintendent, Dr. Vicki Cartwright, school board members, and administrators. Sheriff Gregory Toney, Broward Sheriff's Office, and local law enforcement leaders. Our constitutional officers, followed by agency directors and representatives for the Fort Lauderdale Airport, Port Everglades, Broward MPO, and Florida Department of Transportation. Finally, commissioners for both Memorial Healthcare and Broward Health. Those commissioners, please stand. I want to close by thanking the men and women who have served and protected us, this great nation, on our behalf. Members of our U.S. Armed Forces and veterans. For all of them here, please acknowledge. Thank you. And finally, my colleagues, the members of the Broward Workshop, without whom this wonderful event would not be possible each year. You continue to dedicate your time and talent and resources to make Broward County a great place to live, work, and play. Members, please stand and be recognized. Thank you. There are over 800 people here this morning, a testimony of how strongly we all feel about the state of Broward County. And we appreciate you joining us as the workshop continues to explore ways to find solutions to critical issues that are just naturally a part of a diverse and growing community. Over the years, this forum has provided the workshop an opportunity to open a community dialogue and highlight key issues such as infrastructure needs. We have research on funded pension liabilities and post-retirement benefit costs of our 31 municipalities. We have highlighted and supported the need for improved educational standards and accountability for our children. And along the way, we have also heard a few political speeches. Now, without further delay, let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the morning, the Mayor of Broward County, the Honorable Michael Udine. I have had the good fortune of knowing the mayor for several years. Mayor Udine was elected to serve as a Broward County Commissioner in 2016 and was named mayor last November. He's an attorney by trade, but public service was not new to him. He formerly served for more than a decade as the mayor and city commissioner of Parkland, Florida. As a Parkland resident, his experience with the infamous Marjory Stoneman Douglas school shooting changed him. And using his knowledge, expertise, and influence, he pushed through and finalized the completion of Broward's new state-of-the-art 911 emergency communication system. Text to 911 was launched, and an active shooter training is now mandatory for county employees serving the public. His ability to bring about change to serve the public was recently earned him the United Way of Broward County's Game Changer Award. He joins us today to bring us up to date on the state of the county. Mayor Udine, welcome.
Thank you, Juliet. Thank you so much. Thank you, Juliet. Hello, everyone. It is truly an honor to be with you here today as the mayor of Broward County. And I join you with many of my county commission members that I see here in the audience, who I work with day in and day out to make Broward County a better place. The annual State of the County is a time when we look back at the achievements and progress that we've made over the past year. It also lends us insight into where we are going in the future. And as everyone knows, our perspective on all that has changed over the last few years. The pandemic has taught us that the future is truly unpredictable, and even our best laid plans can go astray. There's no question that 2020 and 2021 were a challenge for county, city, governments, state governments, businesses, medical and healthcare organizations, and most importantly, the 2 million Broward County residents that we serve. I do believe with confidence that Broward County is well on its way to recover at a fast pace, and we should be proud to note that the recovery of our county's economic engines has taken place in relatively short time and in short order. I think this speaks to our leadership, our resiliency. In other words, we're making a great comeback, and as Broward County residents, we should be proud of that. Our unemployment rate is 2.8%, the lowest it's been since January of 2020. Our fiscal year 2020 budget was $6.7 billion, with funding earmarked for affordable housing, the continuation of all county services, human rights initiatives, economic development, and the environment. The economic engines that we depend on for a strong economy are our port, our airport, and our everyone under the sun tourism department. Each negatively impacted by the pandemic and each recovering way beyond our expectations. Big things are happening at Port Everglades, and I mean big. Our port recently welcomed the largest cruise ship in the world, Royal Caribbean's International Wonder of the Seas. Yeah. Port Everglades is the third largest cruise port in the world, with nearly 4 million passengers annually. Another big announcement, Port Everglades completed an agreement with Disney Cruise Line to begin operating at Port Everglades in the fall of 2023. This agreement is for 15 years with a minimum guarantee of over 10 million guests. Plans for the terminal designs are in the works, and this is quite an accomplishment, and we acknowledge how desirable Port Everglades is, and with the addition of Disney, we truly are the happiest place on earth. The port is also one of our biggest cargo ports in the nation, and South Florida's hub for gasoline, petroleum, and jet fuel supplying our region's airports. Despite still operating in a COVID-19 environment, Port Everglades was able to rebuild and reach its target of more than 1 million 20-foot cargo containers in 2021, up over 10%. There are strong indicators that our port is moving forward, advancing projects and programs that will benefit our business partners and the community in years to come. We also have some great statistics about our airport. FLL carried more international passengers than Las Vegas, Minneapolis, Salt Lake City, Chicago Midway, Detroit, Tampa, and Nashville combined in 2021. Yeah. Give it up for the airport. Passenger traffic for April is projected to be at 90% of pre-pandemic levels. And interestingly enough, FDOT recently approved our airport's master plan that projects 52 million annual passengers by 2035. In the last few months alone, 4 new carriers are providing service nationally and internationally out of FLL. We're planning for the growth and new business travel. Billions of dollars have been spent and are being spent on new airport infrastructure and modernization. Bonds were successfully sold. Just last month, we sold bonds to complete both the expansion of the convention center and the new convention center hotel, which will escalate our convention center business and put us in the big leagues for tourism and convention in Broward County. Yeah. Great job by our Visit Lauderdale team. And because Florida remained largely open during the pandemic, tourism is strong. In 2021, a record $99 million in tourist development taxes were collected. Investor interest in Broward County as a tourism destination is strong. 10 new hotels opened in 2021, adding more than 1,200 new rooms, and 7 more hotels will open this year. Technological advancements have changed the way we do things now, and I believe that will escalate into our future. The opening of the Alan B. Levan NSU Center for Innovation is a big win for Broward County. Yeah, give it up for that. The center serves as a tech hub for Broward County and South Florida. Broward County Commissioners approved $6.7 million in matching funds from NSU for the Innovation Center. And at the official opening last week, I was pleased to hear Alan Levan say and comment that it will be his best investment that he ever made. I believe him, and I'm a big fan and frequent visitor to the Innovation Center, and this center holds promise to connect virtually to countries worldwide and opens a brand new venue that will attract global and national technology companies. It's my belief that South Florida is well on its way to being the next Silicon Valley. Our tech gateway is alive and strong. Yeah. County construction and capital improvements continue at a fast pace. In addition to the completion of the Lauderhill Transit Center, the top floor of the new Broward County Courthouse is up and running for large, high-profile trials and special events and was appropriately named after Chief Judge Jack Tudor. Our economic and small business development team has reached an average of 55% of CBE small business participation on county contracts, meaning half the small businesses who become certified through the county are currently working on county projects. Those are dollars that stay in this community and are recycled throughout Broward County. Yeah. The Broward County Commission created a film commission this year, and we are offering film and television incentives, which has the promise to bring new revenue into our county and South Florida region. As we reach success in the film industry, there might just be a new Hollywood, and it'll be located right here in Broward County, not in California. We've come a long way, and we were all impacted by COVID. It's been a challenge to our physical and professional well-being. And while we have made great progress that I've spoken about, we still have work to do. Affordable housing is a top priority that the community and commission needs to come together to solve. The cost of living in South Florida has risen sharply, and personal income has not. This will negatively affect our labor force and increase homelessness. So I hope that the business community and the government can continue to work together to solve these important social issues. I want to thank the Broward County Workshop for allowing me to speak and bring these good wishes from the county. And I want to end on a positive note. I want to give a big shout out to the Florida Panthers. Our Our playoffs are here. Go Panthers. I know we have Matt Caldwell and his team in the room. We have them right where we want them. Our comeback Cats are one down. We'll get them. Let's bring home the Stanley Cup to Broward County. Thank you and enjoy your day.
Thank you for bringing us all the good news that the county is accomplishing. Our economic engines, the airport and seaport, have certainly accomplished several major milestones of late, so that was really great to hear. And so now we will move to Tony Carvajal, the Executive Vice President of Florida Tax Watch, who will provide the highly anticipated economic benchmarks presentation. He is always a favorite. Tony serves as the Executive Vice President for Florida Tax Watch, an independent, nonpartisan public policy think tank, and has more than 30 years of experience in strategic planning, nonprofit management, and business leadership. He has helped many organizations across the country design and implement plans to address both opportunities and disruptions. He was previously the Executive Vice President Futurist at the Florida Chamber, and while there, he served as the principal architect for the Florida 2030 Plan and the 6 Pillars. Please join me in welcoming Tony.
Thank you so much, Juliet, and Broward Workshop and all the dignitaries here. Greatly appreciate another opportunity to get up here. And I appreciate you setting the bar so high. I'm going to do my best to try and keep it going. If you can start the slides. As she mentioned, Florida Tax Watch is an independent, nonpartisan public policy research institute, and I said that all in one breath. We're chaired by Senator George Lemieux, and there are a number of trustees and partners in here. Thank you so much. And I thought I'd start with this because it is Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. Okay. So there's a lot of things that I want to highlight, and Florida Tax Watch covers a broad range of issues. I just want to put it right out front. We're not an anti-tax or an anti-government organization. As a matter of fact, we are a taxpayer advocate. What we want to make sure is that there's a return on investment. We use data, we use research, and not rhetoric to kind of guide our policies. I do want to highlight two things because they were mentioned already. You'll notice on the very top right-hand side of that screen, there is a report on Broward Up, the Aspen semifinalist school in the country, as well as quarterly, thanks to the Broward Community Foundation and support of Broward Workshop. We also review the bond oversight for the school, and Superintendent Cartwright, let me just say publicly, thank you for the support you and your team have been giving us in that report. You can find all of these on our website. This isn't a sales pitch. The reason this is up here is to let you know the one question I always get is, where can I get the slides? Well, they're already posted on any of the social media, so you can find them and you can get them. Let's jump into the numbers. Oops, went too far. Okay, so Florida is going gangbusters. I'm going to have to move this here so I can see this. 17 consecutive months of revenue over the estimates. And that includes after we've adjusted those estimates. Florida is growing, and that includes in dollars as well as in jobs. We've added 497,800 jobs over the last year. We are creating 1 out of every 8 jobs in the country. Our unemployment rate at the state level is 3.2%, but I do have to point out we have a lot of people looking for jobs, 339,000 people looking for work right now. Worse, we have 500,000 jobs looking for people. We've got to find a way to match these two together. What is it like in progress in Broward? Well, Broward is growing as well. We've added 26,500 plus jobs over the last year. The unemployment rate is at what I will call an unsustainable rate, and I'll come back to that in a second, 2.8%. There are 28,000 plus people looking for work and 49,000 jobs that are still trying to find folks. 1 out of every 19 jobs that's created in Florida is created right here in the backyard. I do want to point out, we have not reached the pre-pandemic level, but we're pretty darn close. In February of 2020, the job count in Broward metro region was 874,000. We're just shy of that, so we're coming back to that benchmark shortly. I leave this slide up here because I want to point out, you see that line that goes right across? That kind of shows the number of jobs that we lost when the pandemic came around. We lost almost 10 years worth of jobs. And that sounds dire, except that here's the positive side. We are almost back to that in about 2 years, which means we have gained about 10 years worth of jobs in that time. There's a lot of very positive things to be looking forward to. This chart goes all the way back to 2000. One of the things that I wanted to highlight was that there are 200,000 some jobs that have been created since the turn of the century, which is now a very scary thing to say, but, you know, whatever. What jobs have been created? Well, we've gained across almost all the sectors. You're going to see leisure and hospitality, professional business services, trade, near the top in terms of percentage growth. In number growth. I do want to highlight, though, that there is one sector that is losing jobs. Thankfully, it's not very important, education and health. Oh my gosh, we got to turn this around. It is absolutely amazing Shane Strum looks as good as he does when he wakes up each morning and sees these numbers, right, Shane? The progress is widespread, and it is actually better in many cases than the rest of the state. This chart may be a little hard to read. What it lists is all the sectors across the state and the country, and you're going to see the blue lines are actually the U.S. When it's below the line, that means that it's been losing jobs. You'll notice that leisure and hospitality lost jobs across the country, 9%. The green line is the state of Florida. There are jobs that are increasing: manufacturing, construction, information, trade and utilities, financial and professional and business services. And you're going to see that Florida is outdoing the rest of the country. This, by the way, is a feature on one of the webinars that we had recently at Florida Tax Watch. It's available online. If you want to hear actually the Department of Economic Opportunity talk about this, and there's another slide shortly, you'll be able to just log on at floridataxwatch.org and you can track some of this information. But I told you 2.8% is unsustainable. What that means is that we're really fully employed at this part. This is 3%, let's just say, is a normal number where people are transitioning between jobs. We've got a challenge. There's a lot of jobs that are still looking for people. And when you look at what is actually being sought after, the vast majority are full-time jobs. Now, there's some good things that are coming out of this. Wages are actually increasing, up 6%, actually, since the pandemic. What I will say, though, it's happening very, very quickly, and it is faster than the rest of the country. Wages in Florida are growing faster than anywhere else. The list of what is currently open is shocking, but we're going to talk about what's projected into the future in just a moment. I mentioned that there was another slide that's part of the webinar. This is actually the interesting part. If you want to listen how Department of Economic Opportunity discusses it, what it shows is two lines, and those two lines are the one that is green on the top, those folks in Florida between the ages of 16 to 24, and the bottom line is 55 and up. And it's tracking who dropped out of the workforce beginning around the pandemic side. Well, the youngest population was the last in and the first out, and you'll see that that drop was really, really big, but you'll see that it is now above the mean line. So we are actually gaining jobs and gaining employment across the youngest parts of our state. However, you'll notice that that blue line has barely crossed the mean line. And there's a reason for that. This population is not only slower to come back into job, but they were slower to leave. There's something about mortgages and family commitments that keeps people employed, as those of us who are managers love mortgages, right? This is a fantastic thing. Okay, but we're going to come to start realizing that this population is going to continue to stay under the line for some reason. And most of that is because we've had enough. It's time to start doing something else. So what are the projections growing into the future for Broward? Mayor, you did a fantastic job setting it in context. When you look at this, yes, nurse practitioners are right at the top, but baggage, food prep, avionics, aircraft, concierge, all of these are the fastest growing. Before I leave this slide, I want you to look at the right-hand side of this, the numbers in the hundreds, okay? These are jobs that between here and 2029 are projected to grow in this region. Just remember the hundreds, except that this one number that's in thousands. So if you've got a skillet and you want to work, there is absolutely a job for you in this community. There is no doubt for me. I've been invited back a few different times. Sooner or later, I'm going to get it right. Corrine, thank you. I'll keep trying as long as you keep inviting me. But I want to reflect on the projections, because the projections to 2029, the mayor put it in context. But when I compare to the last time I was here and spoke about the projections to 2025, you're going to see a radical difference between the two lists. On the left-hand side, which was the projections through 2025, there's a lot of healthcare, there's a lot of technology jobs, and that was a big focus. Because of the way the community has changed, you're going to see on the right-hand side that it is a lot of still healthcare, but a lot of the service to support the growth that this community is coming up with. That's not a bad thing. There's no judgment in that statement. I just wanted to highlight the two differences of those lists. It does point out, though, that the majority of jobs into the future are actually going to be jobs that don't require a formal education past high school to some degree. But don't let that stop you at the moment. I've got something more to say about that. Broward community is one of the most educated in the state. There are more bachelor's degrees and advanced degrees, college of some sort, associates, than most places in Florida. So when I look at the growth in the number of jobs that are coming in non-degree sectors, which is fantastic still, but then I compare it to the population, I do have to worry. Except that I'm not here to make you worry about this per se. There's some other things that I want to get you a little agitated about. Because when you look at it, remember that list, and I said notice the right-hand side in the hundreds? Well, when you look at the number of jobs with that are going to be developed with associate's degrees, including those in management and in healthcare, or when you look at those in the bachelor's degrees, which are largely data analysts or accountants and auditors, these are not in the hundreds, these are in the thousands. So that last list, that projection list, was ranked by the percentage of change. There are still high-quality jobs across the whole sector, including advanced degrees for advanced healthcare and lawyers. Now, I'm not sure if anybody thinks that we need tons more lawyers, but here we go. This is what we've got to deal with. So, and by the way, I didn't mean that about you. So what does the labor force actually look like? Now, these are the people that are actually in the Broward labor force. You're going to see a normal curve. If I were going to compare this across communities, the only difference that I would highlight is it's just a little bit older, but not much. One of the lines would normally be in the 30 range in other communities across the state. But that's all right, given that I'm in the big heavy bar. Actually, I'm past the heavy bars. Oh, darn, that's a bad thing. It's a normal distribution, but I told you that there are things that I want you to start worrying about, things that I want you to start thinking about. As we go into the rest of this conversation, these are about preparing for the future, about planning. And the first thing I want you to note is in this curve, today, there are 250,000 people that are probably not going to be in the workforce or will be exiting the workforce at some point over the next 10 to 20 years. What are we doing to replace them? How are we finding quality talent for the future of this jobs? Now, obviously, there's technology, there's productivity gains, there are changes in industries, but there's also attraction. So Broward County is in one of the top 10 growth across the state. Those darkly shaded items on the right-hand side indicate the communities, the counties that are growing. 81% of the growth in the state can be attributed to 10 counties. Our projection to 2030, not very far away, is that we're going to add 180,000 plus individuals into this state. What does that look like in a broader... Oh, actually, before I go to that chart, I do want to highlight something that I noticed that gives me pause. It may be data noise and things that may not be working right because the census was a little screwy for a little while. But I did notice that in a one-year data set difference, the population actually decreased by 0.7% in a one-year data. I'm not sure what's going on here, who you're chasing out or anything like that, but it is a question that we've got to be wondering and following this. Because as we look into future progressions, replacement of those jobs, those 250,000 and the future growth is about population growth. Now, some of you may say, look, we can slow it down. There's a lot of things that come good and bad with this. But I want to highlight, these are the projections out to 2070. So 50 years, I know it's a very long time. But this community, which is currently just shy of 2 million, is projected to grow to 2.7 million individuals. Now, in case you're saying, wow, we can't carry that many people, you're probably right from a technical capacity issue. Where are we going to put them? Where are the roads that we're going to do? What are the jobs? How is it that we're going to support all these individuals? But you can't argue with me that the rate is impossible, because in 50 years ago, in 1972, we had 740,000 residents in this community. So we grew by 1.2 million people in the last 50 years. It's possible that we'll grow, and the critical questions that have to be answered is, what are the resources that are going to be needed? How do we protect what we've got? How does that distribution work across the communities? There's another way to think about population change and things that are going on, and I like including this one because it's not just about number of noses, it's about the actual income migration that's going on. Where is it that Florida is gaining jobs from? Obviously the Northeast and the central communities. Where is it that we're losing to is in the southern belt. But in Broward County, you'll see where we have gained wealth, which is largely from the Northeast as well as Miami-Dade, and we're losing into surrounding communities. Quick nod to my friend Ron Drew and the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance. I stole this from you. I will just go ahead and say that. Thank you so much. And Broward.org has tons of information that you should go and check out. This is the distribution of the population, not in the workforce, but across the community. And one of the reasons I wanted to end with this slide is that when you divide it into thirds, you start wondering about the needs of each of these populations, from the talent development needs, which includes early learning, as well as the retirement services that we're going to provide for individuals. It's the schooling, the housing, the health, the transportation, the environmental impacts, the economic growth, the social programs, taxes, revenues, debt, services, everything across the county has multiple conversations going on. Thank goodness for the work that Broward Workshop is doing in bringing you all together and in focusing on the 5 goals. There's a lot of work to be done. We can end this conversation in despair, or we can end this with hope and piling on support to the community. Let's hope it's the latter. Juliet, thank you so much for the invitation, and I hope that I've provided you a little bit of positive context as we go forward.
Some Tat Swatch fans out there. I love it. So it's always one of my favorites. Tony, I don't know how he delivers it, but we are all very clear on the opportunities and challenges that face our wonderful county. You know, after hearing both Tony and the mayor, I couldn't be prouder to be a Broward County resident and also, of course, a member of this workshop. Our members are so dedicated to making a difference in our community and dedicate their time to the betterment of our county. We're collaborative and bring business to work with the county, school district, agencies, civic and economic organizations to move ideas forward and projects as well. I'd like to share some key successes accomplished and milestones reached with our community partners. First, in the area of affordable housing, the Urban Core Committee facilitated a community coalition of nonprofit government agencies to advocate for the establishment of the Broward County Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which resulted in the county investing $48 million for affordable housing. We'd like to personally celebrate and thank the Commission for being bold in this, because in their decision, they'll support nearly 2,500 low-wage residents, including about 300 seniors. Quite remarkable. You'll hear more about that shortly. Just some other quick highlights. The Race, Equity, and Social Justice Committee engaged our members and supported Broward Up, a Broward College initiative, which members donated computers and funded workforce training to over 300 local residents and placed several of those into jobs as well. Our Tourism Committee we're one of the founders of the Broward County Tourism Coalition and advocated for Visit Florida reauthorization and annual funding. We're proud to say that in collaboration with that organization, we state allocated $50 million funding and reauthorized Visit Florida till 2028. Thank you. So I will share some other highlights later, but I did want to now bring up one of our very own members to share with you what we are doing in the area of affordable housing. Our work is focused on positively impacting the quality of life and economic development in our community. Walter Duke, the chair of the Broward Workshop's Affordable Housing Subcommittee, will talk about housing affordability in Broward County. Walter is the president and sole shareholder of Walter Duke & Partners, a comprehensive commercial appraisal valuation company that provides critical analysis and information relating to commercial real estate valuation to corporate, government, and private clients nationwide, ranging from startups to Fortune 500 companies. The company enjoys a national reputation as a leading provider of boatyard and marina appraisal services to the marine industry. Without further ado, thank you, Walter.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Juliet, for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate that. One thing Juliet did not mention is I am a fully recovered politician, being the former mayor of Dania Beach. Glad to be here. As Juliet mentioned, I do chair the Affordable Housing Subcommittee for the Broward Workshop, and the affordable housing issue has been important to the workshop for a number of years now. But over the last 18 months, this issue has bubbled up to be a top issue with the Broward Workshop and, of course, the county. You heard Mayor Udine mention one of the headwinds we have here in Broward County is where are our workers going to live? We've all heard stories about the price of homes and the rents increasing, and so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to educate you with a report from our committee about what is going on in Broward County with regard to the housing affordability crisis. So the picture that you see on the screen is a community in Broward County called Pinnacle at Tarpon River. Pinnacle at Tarpon River is a typical contemporary affordable housing community. It's 10 stories. It's about 120 units. It is located in an area of downtown Fort Lauderdale that is adjacent to a neighborhood that has homes that are in excess of $20 million. And this community peacefully coexists and is a good neighbor and is a good economic contributor to the local economy. This project, something like this these days, would probably cost close to $350,000 a unit to construct. So these are not cheap places. And the reason I bring this up is because I think when you mention affordable housing to a lot of people, you conjure up an unintentional bias toward affordable housing. You think of slums or projects or communities that are dangerous to the neighborhood, and that's just not the case. That is just not true at all. That's a misconception. So I want to make that important that everybody knows that the current contemporary affordable housing communities in this county are beautiful, safe, clean, and not cheap to build. Another thing that I think we're all sort of inherently aware of, but I want to make everybody aware of what we're dealing with. It's literally a perfect storm of negative conditions for a housing affordability crisis. And you look at the bullets on the screen, you can see them for yourself. But the one thing I would like to point out is if you look at the bottom bullet, key industry is getting priced out. Tony just mentioned it, the mayor mentioned it. You know, we are a service-based industry. 54% of our workforce is in the service industry. And so for us as a local economy, as we seek long-term economic sustainability, it's really important that we figure out where are our workers going to live, where are our service workers going to live. And so right now we have a lot of headwinds. Another thing I want everybody to be aware of, this isn't hyperbole. We're not just saying we have a housing affordability crisis and we'll do better. We are literally ranked as the least affordable place to live in Florida. We are routinely ranked among the least affordable places to live in the country. And when you think about a country with 331 million people, we are last in that category. That's not a good place to be. I mean, I'm very competitive. Everyone in this room, you guys are the people that get things done in this county, and I appreciate you, and I love you. You are my people. But nobody wants to be last in anything. And so certainly we don't want to be last, or no one is being last as a county that takes care of those that need housing the most. One of the headwinds that we just mentioned were rapidly increasing home prices and rapidly increasing rents. This past year alone, housing prices have gone up. The average price, $72,000 in Broward County. Now that's nearly double what the average low-wage worker works in our county. If you look at one of the bullets on the screen, you'll see that only 10% of our population right now can afford the average price house in this county. So you say, okay, well then we'll just rent. Well, guess what? We were number one in the country for rent increases, 57% rent increase in the Metro South Florida market. That is unbelievable. The average rent increase is about $7,000 last year, and we've all been impacted by that. Our parents maybe are priced out of their apartment. Our children are coming back home. Our employees are having increasingly difficult times, places to find to live. And so in Broward County, we really have a real situation on our hands. If you're a homeowner or you're a real estate investor, times are good. But if you're a service industry worker, you work at our hotels or you work in anywhere in the county, any of our big corporations, times are tough right now, and you're really having a tough time finding a place to live here in Broward. Listen, let's be honest. We really can't rely on Tallahassee to get this fixed. And this is nothing against our legislators. We appreciate you. We love your service, and we know you fight hard for us in Tallahassee. But the fact of the matter is, for the last 20 years, the legislator has swept over $2 billion of Sadowski funds that were to be intended for affordable housing that got swept into general funds. So we really can't rely anymore. We can't be the Charlie Brown anymore. We need to take matters into our own hands, much as we did last year with the tremendous leadership by our county for the gap financing. And I'd like to credit Russ Clennett for this comic. Russ, I love that. Thank you very much. Miami-Dade, and Tony's aware of this. Tony will tell you, Russ, you got some love from the fans. How about that? Everybody loves Snoopy. But we don't want to be Charlie Brown anymore. We just know that she's going to take that football away and we're going to fall down. So we're not going to depend on Tallahassee to get affordable housing fixed. We're going to take care of it right here. Tony will tell you that Broward County is number 2 in most categories economically with Dade County. And that's fine. This is the 15th biggest economy in the world, the state of Florida is, and you can see the tremendous numbers that Tony put up there. But when it comes to housing affordability and affordable housing, Miami is way ahead of us. I mean, and I think that's one of the reasons why when you talk to somebody like Tim Petrillo, who has 400 employees in the restaurant business, He says he doesn't have any trouble at all filling slots in Miami, but he can't find people to work in Broward. And I can't help but think that that has something to do with the fact that there are more affordable housing options in Miami-Dade County. In fact, right now in Miami-Dade County, there are 14,000 affordable housing units in the pipeline. Broward County, there's 2,000. And we're not that much smaller than Miami-Dade, so I think that's a gap that we need to fill. You know, the pandemic revealed a lot to us about our economic vulnerabilities, and the business community took notice. Affordable housing has always been a good quality of life issue and something that's important to our nonprofit, but it's becoming increasingly important to the business community. For instance, you know, we learned during the pandemic that our key drivers like tourism, hotels, hospitality, construction, our service industry are becoming increasingly at the mercy of a labor pool that's finding it harder and harder to find a place to live in Broward County. That's not a good thing. If we don't have, we can create jobs, but if we don't have any place for them to live, that's going to be a problem. I was talking with Heiko Dobekrow of Career Source. He's also the GM of the wonderful historic Riverside Hotel in Fort Lauderdale. He said that right now there's a deficit in Broward County of 7,300 hotel service workers, restaurant workers that we can't fill, we can't find. Then you go to Stacy Ritter's wonderful Visit Florida website, and on that site it tells you there are 7,000 rooms in the pipeline, and there's typically about one employee per room. So we have a deficit of 7,300. We have 7,000 more hotels on the pipeline. Where are these 14,000 people going to live? I mean, right now we have a situation where hotel owners are literally working at the towel hut and handing out towels, and that's not a good situation for us to remain competitive in a business environment. I know Fran Esposito's here today, and she does a wonderful job as a homeless advocate. And Kathleen Cannon, United Way, fantastic organization. She's a tireless worker, and both of them will tell you, thank you. Both Fran and Kathleen will tell you that one of the best ways to combat homelessness is to produce a more robust pipeline of affordable housing. And this is something I wanted to bring to the attention of a lot of our city leaders and municipal leaders, and I know the business community is tuned into this, but the fact of the matter is that when you spend money on affordable housing, you're not really expending money, you really are investing. It's an investment. There are studies done by the state recently that show that for every dollar invested in affordable housing, there's a 40-cent return on that. I've done studies internally in my office that show that for a typical $5 million investment in a 100-unit community here in Broward, which is the typical size community, there's a 7-to-1 return on that investment, and it gets paid back in 3 years from the spending of the residents, from the construction. It's really a very positive economic event. And when you think about a 100-unit community where everyone in that community is not rent burdened, is not severely worried about how are they going to make their house payment, and they have money to spend, they're better consumers. They're better consumers in a local neighborhood. So I think that's something to keep in mind. If you have many communities where everyone that lives there has disposable income, they can buy bread, they can buy groceries, they can buy gas, things that you can't do if you're strapped. You know, our 255,000 Alice households in the county, 76% of them rank number one. Their number one worry is how I'm going to make my house payment, my housing costs. So this is a moment I'd like to give some credit, and Mayor Udine mentioned this, to our current county commission, and also Commissioner Sharif and Holness were in the last commission, who all unanimously supported this $47 million in gap funding. Let's give them a huge hand for that. Yeah, no, I mean, they really stepped up. They recognized that they got a sense of the importance of this issue, and that they were approached, as Juliet mentioned, by stakeholders from all across the county. And they stepped up big. The year before, the commitment was $5 million. So they went from $5 million to almost $50 million. And you can see in the red boxes what that resulted in. 9 new communities, over 1,000 units, 2,500 residents, low-wage residents will be served, 2,000 jobs will be created, including the construction. And, you know, this is a business issue, as I mentioned, $275 million in construction contracts. Think about all the jobs that are created. And, again, those people need places to live, so it's a circular issue that we need to solve here. But I do really want to thank the County Commission. I know they're all over this, all of them that I talk to and work with, and Monica Sapira and her staff, and Ralph Stone, the County Housing Finance Director. Fantastic people. Our infrastructure is good. Our staffing is good. We just need funding. So in closing, I want to lay out a path forward, what I think is probably what we should be doing to put our tools in the tool chest. Number one, although, yes, we were funded $48 million last year. It was a one-time funding. We really need to work together, all of us, to figure out a dedicated funding source every year. Miami-Dade has a surtax, a dedicated annual surtax of $60 million a year in and year out. They can plan for it, they can leverage it, they can bond against it. It's really an amazing tool, and we need more of that. And you look to the north in Palm Beach County, they're getting ready to issue a $160 million bond for affordable housing. Orange County, a $168 million bond for affordable housing. Miami-Dade County, with all of their current tools in their tool chest, are getting ready to issue an additional $400 million bond, of which 25% will be geared specifically toward affordable housing. So I really think moving forward, I know that the county staff is working on this. I know collectively we all know this needs to get solved, but I think a dedicated funding source is going to be key moving forward. Number two, we need to continue to support the CRA sunsetting fees. Those numbers aren't real big right now. They're $5 or $6 million a year, but in 2028, they jump up to almost $30 million, and then they jump up again. We need to make sure to maintain, to nurture those funds, to make sure that they are allocated to affordable housing and they're not swept for any other use. Number three, and I speak mostly to our municipal leaders and our city managers, in addition to the county, we really need to work collectively to lower the headwinds and costs to bring affordable housing to fruition. That's rezoning, that's fees, that's permitting issues. We need to fast track that. We need to streamline that. We need to make it less expensive to build, therefore less expensive to rent. And then finally, density needs to be our friend. We need to embrace and increase density here. And nobody knows that better than Commissioner Geller, who put forth a land use amendment last year that incentivizes density along major transportation corridors. And I think that lays the groundwork for policy moving forward. And let's give Senator Geller a good hand for that. I really think he's onto something, and I've already seen that happen in action. So, in closing, in 2018, the Broward County voters were asked, do they want to support an affordable housing land trust? And it was passed 73%, overwhelmingly. Even before this current crisis, the voters of this county said, yes, this is important to us, this is an issue to us. And so I do believe there is the will out in the county for us to solve this problem. And I think collectively, if all of us together at the county leadership, city leadership, stakeholders, nonprofits, if we collectively work together and we take bold action right now, I think we'll be able to look back 10 or 20 or 30 years from now and say the action that we took now, the action that we took in 2022 and 2023 is going to make Broward County a more affordable place to live, a more economically sustainable place to live for future generations. Thank you much for your time.
His passion is so evident. Thank you so much, Walter, for leading the workshop's efforts in affordable housing. And, like you, I do not like to be last at anything, but sometimes you kind of need to have that wake-up call to do better. And I think we are on that track. So now, for our keynote on a very hot and relevant topic, when Tony Carvajal gave his presentation, he referenced many generational trends that are already making an impact in workforce. So this is very, very timely. We will learn how analyzing generational trends will prepare employers to shape the next era of future workplaces and workspaces, business culture, and corporate social responsibility. To share her insights, we are fortunate to have a nationally acclaimed expert, Kim Lear. Kim is the founder of Inlay Insights, a research firm and think tank focused on demographic shifts and cultural evolution. Today, Kim will inform us about the generational trends shaping the future. She has keynoted for some of the most renowned companies in the world, receiving rave reviews from clients such as Disney, Deloitte, American Express, LinkedIn, and more. Her work has been featured on National Public Radio as well as in national publications such as the Wall Street Journal, the Huffington Post, USA Today, Time Magazine, and more. So we're fortunate to have her. She immediately, you can start coming up, Kim. She immediately recognized the far-reaching impacts of the national pandemic, and since March 2020, she and her team conducted 2 very significant research projects exploring the future of work in uncertain times. The first project provided insight into quarantine, work from home, and the new normal, and the second focused on the Great Resignation and attempts to uncover why people left their jobs, where they went, and what, if anything, could have enticed them to stay? I think we're all wondering that. So I hope you're as excited as I am. Please help me welcome Kim Lear.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It really is an honor. I started working in Florida about 12 years ago, and some of the greatest leaders that I've had the privilege to work with have come from this state. So it's wonderful to be here with you. So we are going to be diving into the generational trends that are shaping the future. And I do like to get started on the ground level just to look at who the generations are. And I do like to get a little temperature gauge for who I've got in the room just as we move forward. So I'll show the breakdown, and if you want to bump yourself down a generation or whatever you guys want to do, that's totally fine. We have our baby boomers born between 1946 and 1964, a big group of about 80 million. And where are the baby boomers? Okay, wonderful, great. Good. Sometimes the boomers are like on the chairs cheering for themselves. And then Gen X, 1965 to 1979. So, wow. Look at that Gen X pride. I love it. Usually skeptical Gen Xers don't believe anything I say until I talk about you or your children, so we'll get there. And then millennials born between 1980 and 1995, a big group of about 82 million. I think one of my favorite things that is happening recently is some of my clients still think millennials are like 12, and I'm like, we're 40 and live in the suburbs and drive minivans. And then Gen Z, roughly 96 to 2010-ish. Great, okay, good. Those dates will probably change a little bit. Does anyone feel like they have 1 foot in one generation and 1 foot in another? Kind of, oh, look at that, all right. So in the original sociology textbook on this topic, there is a chapter dedicated to you, and it's called Cuspers. Essentially what research found is that people who sit in between two demographics, they may feel like they're not part of this generational conversation, but in reality you play an important role in communicating. You can understand both perspectives, see both sides. You may find that in your family or in the workplace you're doing a lot of translating, a lot of mediating. So you are generationally bilingual. You can add that to your LinkedIn profile and make way more money. It's super lucrative. The other thing to know about these dates is that this is just a starting place. As you can imagine, it's not like anyone goes to sleep on December 31st of one year and someone wakes up January 1st of another year and is a different species. What we're actually looking at here, the academic backbone of generational theory, is looking at events and conditions from our formative years. And our formative years are roughly our teenage years. It's during this time in brain development where we're coming to terms with the world around us. So what's happening in the world at that time, it has a lasting impact on how we view things like sacrifice, risk, work ethic, social justice, politics. We all remember being teenagers. Some of you may be currently raising teenagers. And if that's the case, I'm genuinely sorry. But it's this period of brain development where teenage angst comes from. So perhaps your whole life your parents tell you to think a certain way, act a certain way, vote a certain way. You reach a stage, you decide you're going to do it your own way. And it's that period of brain development that we study how these shared experiences result in behavioral patterns and consumer trends. And generational theory is rooted in sociology, not psychology. But both schools of thought are equally important, especially for leaders. Psychology is looking at who you are as an individual, your unique brain, your relationship to your parents, the way you practice religion. Sociology, we're looking at broader macro trends, demographic shifts, and evolving cultural norms. We're trying to understand why we can do something today and it's totally acceptable, but if we did it 20 years ago, it would have been wildly taboo. So just know that as we go through this, we're not trying to capture the story of one person. We're trying to capture how the mood changes, how the ethos of an era evolves, and what that means for our communities, for the workplace, and for what is expected from leaders. So with that, I am going to go into the baby boomers, and I allocated a little bit more time for millennials and Gen Z just because I know that there's some questions there. But we'll start here with the baby boomers. Many years ago, my undergrad research was exclusively on this group. And one of the reasons for my interest in baby boomers is that if you study generations from thousands of years ago, one thing that you find is it's rare for any generation to actually see the fruits of their labor. So typically what happens is you work hard to create change, and then you die, and hopefully your children get to experience that change. And that sounded less morbid in my head, but it's like the cycle of change. But boomers grew up. There was 80 million. It was the largest generation in American history. We had the bull market of the 60s behind you. And the world was saying, if anyone's going to change things and challenge the status quo, it's you and it's now. And I'm going to just give you an example of how this area of study is conducted. And I'll give a baby boomer example here. One thing my team and I will do when we are conducting research focus groups is we'll separate the focus groups by generation, and into each group we'll bring an institution or an ideology and ask that generation to talk to us about their first memory. So I'll use NASA as an example. If I go into a baby boomer focus group and I say, talk to me about your first memory of NASA, what do you think most baby boomers say? Landing on the moon. And even now, I ask them what that moment meant, and for many of them, their eyes still get wide. This moment of incredible national pride, winning the space race, being taught that if you have the right technology, if you work hard enough, the sky's the limit, anything is possible. It was moments like that that helped fuel this optimistic and idealistic youth culture of the 1960s and early 1970s. If I walk next door to the Gen X focus group and I ask Gen Xers, what is your first memory of NASA? What do most Gen Xers say? The Challenger. And you remember that exactly. There was a teacher on that shuttle. You watched it in school. You never forget. And Gen Xers will tell me if we could have trusted anyone, we could have trusted the geniuses at NASA, and we were let down. It was a moment of disappointment. Just a side note, by the way, there are good things about being a Gen Xer. We just haven't talked about any of them yet. But we definitely will. But we look for these moments of generational juxtaposition to help us understand how a new generation could come up and see the world a little bit differently. And so, but for boomers, there was more of that optimism and idealism. And that booming post-war economy really can't be underestimated in its lasting impacts on baby boomers. By 1961, the median man between 25 and 29 years old was making about 400% more than his father made at that same age. And even though boomers were very young, it was that economic engine that brought them into adolescence. And so even now, when we look at the generation most likely to believe in the American bootstrapping narrative, it is baby boomers, partly because it's a very personal story. I bring that up because as we look at the other generations, understanding how that economic backdrop that you grow up with can shape some of your views moving forward. The last thing here I want to mention with baby boomers is their life stage. And Tony had mentioned this before as well, is that, in America, we've got about 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every day. One piece that I think is worth noting is in a lot of the narrative around the Great Resignation, it seems to be very focused on 22-year-olds walking out of barista jobs. But I think it's important to know that almost half of the people who have participated in the Great Resignation are over the age of 55 and have no intention of ever rejoining the workforce. And that section of our workforce was absolutely critical because that's what was compensating for very low immigration and a cliff-diving birth rate. And so a lot of my clients are like, where is everyone? Why aren't people working? They don't exist. I mean, there's also just a huge demographic shift that we are looking at right now in terms of how many workers are actually available. Now that I've depressed you, I'll give you a good thing here. But one thing that has been interesting in watching as baby boomers have approached this life stage is how they have transformed what it means to age in America. In an era of longevity, what it means to grow older has really transformed. And this young at heart, this optimistic generation has created this real young at heart spirit. And many years ago, The Atlantic magazine, they were taking a series of photographs looking at what will the world look like as baby boomers age, and this was one of the photos. College towns beat coastal towns for best places to retire in 2018. And so the new report will come out this year. But, it used to be that maybe Fort Lauderdale was fighting with Palm Beach and things like that for these high-end retirement dollars. And now we're seeing a lot of movement in places like Raleigh-Durham, Austin, Texas, Madison, Wisconsin. As retirees tell us, we want to be in places with more walkability, better food, better art, more access to higher education. Between 1990 and 2015, there was a 90% increase in education spending among the 50-plus demographic. When Oxford Economics ran this report, they took out money being spent on kids. And so I bring some of this up because we live in a really ageist country. And I see this in every industry I work in. I do a lot of work in healthcare. And you would think if one industry wasn't ageist, maybe it would be healthcare. But 93% of med school grads last year did not take one class in gerontology. And we live in an aging country. So we see this show up in a lot of different ways. But we were already seeing this generation really change the narrative around aging, and then we put a pandemic on top of it. In this pandemic time capsule that we created, 2,000 people through a quantitative study and 250 people through a qualitative study, some of our most inspiring stories came from older people who adopted technology very quickly, some tools that they had not used before. A large portion of this population is still very active in the workforce, and they wanted to still see their friends and their kids and their grandkids and things like that. When we saw how they were spending money, right, much more money being spent online and through their phones very quickly. I had the privilege of working with AARP as they were transforming their marketing messaging, and I'll show you this commercial of how AARP now speaks to this young at heart generation as they go through this time of transformation. If you look up this hashtag Disrupt Aging on social media, you'll see that there are thousands of people who have uploaded their own stories of encore careers, unconventional retirements, and it's an interesting place just to follow the story of how aging has changed. In terms of what this means for leaders, one is with this Great Resignation, when we have spoken with people who decided to retire earlier than they had planned, one of the main reasons that they give us is they were bored. And I think something that happens in the workplace, especially because of some of this ageism and these ideas that we have that are really outdated, that when something really interesting or innovative comes to the desk of leaders, they're kind of quick to give that project to a younger person. And the reality is that we have a huge portion of our workforce where they have the institutional knowledge and the wisdom and also the hunger to innovate and to change. And so I think getting some of those ageist ideas out of the way because they're no longer reflective of reality. And we see this in how boomers spend money. I mean, the number one purchaser of the Apple iWatch was boomers. And one reason is you guys have more money than the rest of us. But also a genuine interest in what is new and the latest and greatest. And so even when we talk about how to speak to the marketplace, these tech-empowered elders will end up transforming our marketplace as well. With that, I will go into Gen X. Yeah. Do you guys remember MTV? I heard MTV used to play music videos, so that must have been an amazing time. Do any of you remember Jenny's phone number? Yeah, locked in. That number's locked in. So the biggest event and condition that I look at with Gen X is the emergence of 24-hour media. And MTV is an important part of that youth culture of Gen X, but more impactful, 1980, Ted Turner put CNN on the air. And this was the start of the 24-hour news cycle. So these institutions that were built by traditionalists, improved upon by baby boomers, they were all being called into question in front of your 12-year-old eyes in your living room. This was WorldCom, Enron, organized religion, sports, politics. During the formative years of Gen X, you remember one president saying, "I'm not a crook," and another president saying, like, other stuff. And there was just no truth to any of that. And Gen Xers became really skeptical. By the time the average Gen Xer was 20 years old, you had watched 23,000 hours of television. And you couldn't binge watch anything. You couldn't fast forward through commercials. So during your formative years, you were being sold to constantly. And advertising then doesn't have the same regulation as it does today. So this was like the Wild West of advertising. Does anyone remember the ab roller? It was supposed to give you a smoking hot body, but it was recalled and it broke your back. It was stuff like that. To this day, when we measure the brand loyalty of Gen X, we find an unforgiving segment. If you lie to them, if you cross them one time, it's hard to bring them back into the fold. And it wasn't just these institutions being called into question on television. There was also the institution of marriage being called into question on the home front. And during the Gen X birth years, the U.S. divorce rate doubled. So you've got a generation of kids who come home to empty homes. Either both parents are working or parents are divorced. So Gen Xers let themselves off the school bus, let themselves in the door, put their own food in the microwave, did their own homework, organized their own time. One of the trends that we still see with Gen X is this streak of fierce independence. Even today, when I ask Gen Xers how they want to work, they'll say things like, "Tell me what you want, where you want it, when you want it, how you want it. I'm going to go away, and hopefully you're about to go away, and then we can get it done." And 20 years ago, when millennials came pouring into the workplace, typically a more collaborative generation, we were chasing down our Gen X managers. Like, I thought we were going to work in a treehouse and write on a whiteboard, and Gen Xers were like, "Get away from me." So we had some of that tension that has since been alleviated. But the skepticism is really the main piece that I'll talk about because it has the biggest impact on communication trends that we see today. And I will share with you an advertisement that came out. It played during the Super Bowl in the early 1990s. And to me, this does the best job of really capturing the zeitgeist of that era. It's from Monster.com, and this is how Monster spoke this skeptical Gen X language to a group of kids about to go to work.
When I grow up, I want to file all day.
I want to claw my way up to middle management. Be replaced on a whim. I want to have a brown nose.
I want to be a yes man.
Yes woman. Yes, sir. Coming, sir.
Anything for a raise, sir.
When I grow up,
I want to be underappreciated.
Be paid less for doing the same job.
I want to be forced into early retirement.
You don't really know whether to laugh or cry after that one. It's like an emotionally confusing commercial. You will notice this now because I'm pointing it out to you, but you saw how different those tones were between that AARP commercial and this Monster commercial. And that more optimistic, idealistic communication is typically what is used when a company is going after baby boomer pockets. And this like weird, dark humor is usually what is used for Gen X. So some of the trends that we see here, and I want to be really clear on this, these are trends, not traits. I'm not saying that everyone born between this date and this date is this. We're looking at observable behavior and longitudinal studies. And so this is when we started to see a lot more marketplace skepticism, which is easy to measure. Independent entrepreneurial, this is the most entrepreneurial generation. 55% of startup founders fall into the Gen X category. And you think about that, it makes sense. You've got a generation of kids who don't really trust the system, and they taught themselves how to work outside of it. Gen X parents are the group most likely to homeschool their children for non-religious purposes. So again, we see some of that skepticism and then some of that independent spirit. So the skepticism I will talk about because it's had a big impact on communication. A more skeptical environment has created this honest, direct, unfiltered style of communication. I lovingly say that Gen Xers seem to have a very sensitive BS-o-meter. And I remember my first time coming head-to-head with this style of communication. It was very early on in my career. It was on day 12. And I had done my undergrad and my master's all around sociology and social theory. And I sort of felt like on day 12, I pretty much got it. And I should start to implement change because that was appropriate. So I got a meeting on the books with David Stillman, who was my then boss, my now mentor. And it was David's original research that got me interested in this area of study in the first place. And I just idolize him. And he could be the poster child for Gen X. Direct, honest, unfiltered. And I didn't really know that going into this meeting. So for reasons I still can't understand, I thought this meeting was going to go really well. I thought he was going to be like, wow, you're so smart, and I'm so smart for hiring you, and I'm going to mentor you, and we're going to hit the ground running. So it was really realistic. I get into this meeting with David, and I don't get 2 seconds into my first idea before he stops me and says, what kind of research do we need in order to get this done? Is this domestic? Is this international? Can we run it in-house? Do we have to meet up with an outside market research firm? What void is this filling in the marketplace? What kind of clients do we go after with this? And I'm physically getting smaller as he's asking me these questions. And the meeting ends when David says something like, I wouldn't call these ideas. These are more just words you know that you've put together. It was so brutal. And I ran back to my office right before I burst into tears, and who did I call? My mom. I'm 22. I call my mom. And my mom, who's sort of a classic baby boomer, she was like, well, maybe David's stupid and you're smart. And I'm like, no, Mom, that's not what happened. But it was in that very brief interaction with David where I learned something critical about what I am responsible for when I'm communicating with him. And I need to be able to anticipate and prepare for his skepticism. And even to this day, David vets a lot of my material. And if I go and present him with something, I need to proactively write down the 10 questions that he might have, and I better have research-backed, fleshed-out answers to those questions. And if there's something I don't know, I have to feel comfortable saying, I don't know, I'm going to find out, I'm going to get back to you. But once I stopped taking that communication style so personally, once I stopped getting so defensive, it became my most productive working relationship because no one vets my material with a more precise eye than David, but I needed to be open to that type of feedback. And I bring this up because we have been talking about generations in the workplace for so long now, and a lot of the conversations are not productive, partly because they typically are very youth-centric, and it is about how does everybody change in order to accommodate these new 22-year-olds. And what we have learned is that everybody has to bend a little bit. And so if David resonated with you, you're rude, but also thinking about how do you train your people to best manage you, right? How do you how can you be able to articulate the type of communication that you are most responsive to, and then arm your people to be prepared in that way? And I bring this up because so many good ideas fall through the cracks because of these communication issues. And you'll have young people, brilliant young people, where they just don't necessarily understand the nuances of how to get people on their side, how to appropriately vet their ideas before putting it on the desks of leaders. And that is the job of leaders, is to teach people how to do those things so that these good ideas can rise to the top. The last thing that I want to talk about here is their life stage. Every generation of middle-aged Americans since 1980 has been referred to as the sandwich generation, and it's referring to the stage where you're caring for aging parents on one side and school-aged children on the other. Take the pandemic out of it, and I already felt that Gen Xers were in a particularly precarious situation with this life stage. The illnesses ailing their parents are chronic, long-lasting, time-consuming, and very expensive. On the other side, this is the first generation of parents to navigate the teenage years with social media. Then you put a pandemic on top of it. You've got elder vulnerability and childcare disruptions. This is also the group that's in the midst of their prime earning years. In these interviews during the pandemic, it was this group where the responses were the most emotional. You have a lot of people right now who are trying to figure out, how can I be a good leader to my people, a good child to my parents, and a good parent to my children? I would say for leaders to really understand that the best gift that you can give someone in this life stage is the gift of their time back. Looking at the schedule, being unrelenting in your edits. It's been 2 decades now where we've been telling jokes about meetings that could have been emails. And if there is something really great that happened during this pandemic, is it really did allow people to look at the way we've been working and try to figure out, are we being respectful with people's time? How can we make these moments of meaning really matter in better ways and these meaningless moments go away? So with that, I will go into, oh, good. I'm glad. With that, I will go into the millennials. You guys remember Napster? Remember when they told us we could no longer steal music? And we were like, how dare you? The biggest events and conditions that I look at with millennials fall into one of 2 categories. One has to do with technology, and the other has to do with how violence was experienced. So the first with technology, the experience with social media between millennials and Gen Z is one of the biggest differentiators between these 2 generations. Millennials were there at the dawn of social media. These platforms were ad-free and adult-free. The technology was too new and we were too young to know that we were for sale. And so we didn't grow up with language around data privacy or the attention economy. And because of this, these platforms really served as a haven for youth culture. This was a golden era for creators of color who could sidestep traditional gatekeepers in order to build their own audiences. It was actually a very optimistic and idealistic time for this type of technology. 2011 kicked off with the Arab Spring and ended with Occupy Wall Street. And what we can learn from that is that it was this era of experimentation where young people were trying to figure out, what do we do with this megaphone? What is its power and how is it best leveraged? And these are questions that are now inherited by Gen Z. The other area that we look at is how violence was experienced. And every generation has had more than their fair share of violence. With the millennials, we look at the beginnings of the desks next to us. And this is, of course, 9/11, it's Virginia Tech, it's Oklahoma City, it's Columbine. There are a lot of studies done to try to understand how this interaction with violence at a young age impacts the psyche of youth. But one area that sometimes we forget about is how this impacted our school system. After Columbine, there was an influx of public money that went into schools for things like guidance counselors. And these guidance counselors were trained in trauma. They weren't there to get you out of biology. And you think about that from a generational perspective, where I'll ask my dad, Dad, if you were bullied in school, did you talk to your guidance counselor? And my dad is like, what is a guidance counselor? What you would call bullying, I think I called Tuesday, so kind of a different trend. But you think about the implications of 82 million young people coming through a school system that has fundamentally changed, that adults are there to work with you, not against you, that telling you to speak up, that your voice matters. And that ethos funneled outside of the school system. It wasn't just teachers and coaches. It was priests and rabbis and coaches and mentors, but no one was doing this more than our baby boomer parents. Baby boomer parents and millennial children have a notoriously close relationship. And one of the reasons for this closeness is this backdrop of violence creating a cultural moment where parents felt like they needed to hold their kids a little bit closer. Another reason for this closeness is a lot of baby boomers wanted to have relationships with their children that they typically did not have with their own parents. I'm curious from the boomers in this room if you wouldn't mind just shouting out some of the things that you could not talk to your parents about. It's either sex in unison or no one says anything because you still can't talk about it. You're like, don't say anything. If I ask you to reflect on your relationship with your children, would you say that those are more open, that there's more things able to discuss? So back in 2009, when a large portion of millennials were in the midst of their formative years, Google Chrome released a campaign that shows this close parent-child relationship and the role that technology plays. This is sort of an emotional commercial, so sometimes I hesitate to show it, but I think it does a good job of kind of capturing this moment in time. And so this is how Google depicts the relationship.
No, I'm fine. Can we do this again tomorrow?
Anytime.
I miss having my own room.
What do you think?
That's a little better.
A little better?
Yeah. This is my boyfriend, Jamie. I don't feel at home here. I feel homesick. Love you. Alright, don't stay up too late, okay?
Hi, alligator.
See you later, alligator. In a wild crocodile.
In a wild crocodile. I remember that.
The generational response to this commercial is always kind of interesting because a lot of times there are a lot of boomers and millennials who will find it emotional, and there's always a couple, like a handful of Gen Xers who are like, that seems like a very codependent relationship, and I'm like, okay. But I think that this does kind of bring us back to that kind of 2009 era of the internet, and even that statement, the web, it's what you make of it, where now that, sophisticated algorithms and even our understanding of the internet and social media, it's transformed so much that now people kind of feel like actually the web is sort of whatever they make of it, and we're just all along for this very dysfunctional ride. So you see how kind of the conversation changes. As a result of these different events and conditions, of course, we see a generation show up with some different trends. Collaborative, social media at its core is a collaborative technology. The collaborative family structures of the 1980s really transformed American families. We shifted from a culture where children should be seen and not heard to a culture that put a premium on youth voices. I do work in K through 12 facilities. It was during the formative years of millennials where we shifted from traditional lecture styles to sitting in groups of 4. And the reason for that is the reigning research at the time said that if you put kids together in this configuration, they'll have better conflict resolution skills, be better collaborators, and in many ways that's what we found. Empowered, networked, risk-averse. Risk aversion is measured by entrepreneurial rates, which are low, and investment patterns, which are overly cautious based on age. In search of meaning, the one comment I'll say here, because I think it can actually inform us on our current moment, is that when millennials entered the workforce in the early 2000s, there was a lot of this frustration with senior leaders that I spoke with, where they would say things like, when I came into the world of work, I put my head down and I did the work until I ascended into a role where I had more meaning. And now all of a sudden, I've got 22-year-olds walking in the door and they want to understand why they matter to this company and why this company matters to the world. And it kind of fueled some of that conversation on entitlement. But something that we have learned is this idea of mortality salience, which is that when large groups of people face illness or death, it causes this moment of kind of communal introspection of people saying, am I doing what I want to be doing? And it's important to note that millennials poured into the workforce during that post-haze of 9/11, which was a moment of mortality salience. And so that can give us an understanding of how that idea of meaning came into the workplace. I have just a couple more things here. I also know that we're coming up on time, and I know you're all busy. If you need to leave, please do. I will not be offended. The last thing here that I just want to touch on with millennials is these family structures. And I'm going to specifically address the rise of dual income households and egalitarian marriages. Just a couple of disclaimers here. The secondary research currently available to me is primarily on heterosexual couples, but I recognize that there are many different ways to create a family. Also, I'm specifically looking at homes with two parents in the household, but it is worth noting that America has more children growing up in single-parent households than anywhere else in the world. So again, when we think about the future of affordable housing, and when we think about the future of affordable childcare, that's really at the center of what it's going to take in the future to create strong communities. But this rise of dual income households. In 1960, about 25% of households were dual income, and by 2018, that was 66% of households. And I use a picture of Jay-Z and Beyonce just because I feel like we can all relate to that type of earning power. And I bring this up for two reasons. One is that the Great Resignation would not be possible without this rise of dual income households. And in the interviews that we've done, there are a lot of couples where they're just pulling up their benefits, and whoever has better benefits keeps their job, and whoever has worse benefits can go and look for something else. And so that's part of what is fueling this movement right now. But another reason I bring this up is that as women started contributing more financially to the home front, men started contributing more domestically. So in 1965, fathers spent about 6.5 hours per week on household work and childcare, and by 2018, that was 18 hours per week. I think my favorite thing that ever happened in a presentation is I showed this slide, and a woman yelled out, "Well, is this self-reported?" And this isn't in any way to say that one generation of fathers was bad and this one is good. It's just the social construction of fatherhood changes the same way the social construction of everything changes. And it's just, what is expected has evolved. I'll use my dad the last time I'll use my dad as an example, but he's a great dad. We're very close. But I distinctly remember when he came to the pediatrician with my mom and me, I was like 6, and I was convinced I was dying because why was my dad at the pediatrician? I was just so unusual. And so we see how this has shifted. In 2016, when millions of millennials started having kids, Dove, for the first time, started advertising to men, and they aired an ad during the 2016 Super Bowl, and this is how Dove tried to reach a new generation of young fathers.
Daddy?
Dove meant...
Sorry. I do try to cut it off before the hard Dove sell at the end. I don't secretly work for Dove. In terms of what this means, these workplace conversations around flexibility and work-life balance, these issues used to be able to be put into this box labeled women's issues and really pushed into the corner. The reason that this is at the forefront of workplace conversations today isn't only because of the pandemic and because of what tech has enabled us to do, it's also because now men care. And this has really transformed this next era of work as families really try to decide what is possible for us, what is it that we want, and this reevaluation of the stories that they have inherited about families. So with that, I'm going to end here with Gen Z, and we'll go over a few trends. I work with 42 college campuses, and that's primarily where I run these focus groups. And in the focus groups, I say, 50 years from now, a historian is going to write about this time. They're going to write about the events and conditions shaping your generation. What do you think they'll write about? And I hear things like the Trump-Clinton campaigns. I hear about Trump's presidency, global climate change, the Unite the Right March, the Women's March, social media, specifically TikTok and Snapchat, George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, the pandemic, of course, school shootings, obviously Parkland and Newtown being the ones that they most discuss. Part of my job is to capture from people, thousands of people, about the events and conditions that they feel are shaping their generation. And part of my job is to explore glaring omissions. I would say the glaring omission for Gen Z is growing up with the backdrop of growing inequality. A fish doesn't know it's in water. But it's hard to really understand modern parenting strategies or this high-stakes adolescence without really understanding some of the economic anxiety that underlies many of these trends. A few things to note is, one, this close parent-child relationship. So even before the pandemic, this relationship between Gen X parents and their Gen Z kids was heavily studied because they really have this friendship-like dynamic. One study found that about 70% of teenagers say their parents are their best friends. And I love talking to Gen Xers about that because the Gen Xers are like, no thanks. But there's a lot of theories as to why this is happening. One of those theories is that between traditionalist parents and their baby boomer children, there was a cultural revolution. Between baby boomer parents and their millennial children, although close, there was a technological revolution. But between Gen X parents and their Gen Z kids, there wasn't an upheaval of that magnitude. So I'll be in focus groups with moms in their 40s, and if you're a mom in your 40s and have teenage daughters, sometimes the clothes you wear are not that different, the music you listen to, the shows you watch. So for the first time, we have these parent-child relationships where they have the same cultural touch points. This has really shaped recruitment in the workplace right now, because recruitment is essentially a sales job, and all sales at this point are intergenerational. And a lot of these young candidates are heavily influenced by their number one influencers, who are typically mom and dad. So even just thinking about in recruitment material, making sure that what is being addressed are not only things that are important to the candidate, things like, competitive compensation and learning and development opportunities, career trajectory, PTO time, but also things that their parents will be asking them, like what is the dental plan and what is the 401k matching program, things like that, in order to bring them on. The other piece, in terms of diversity, about 76% of baby boomers are white, and for Gen Z, that's about 50%. So again, when we look at the future of communities, the future of work, just the numerical reality is communities and organizations that are not genuinely inclusive cannot compete with the ones that are. And because Gen Z is a smaller generation, there is this war for talent. It's a talent demand economy, and so that is really critical. We also see that young women are now the majority of PhD holders, graduate degree holders, undergrad students. 70% of high school valedictorians are young girls, and so we start to see a little bit of a shift there as well. The two last pieces that I want to talk about is one being the well-being revolution, which is the new science of mind-body connections and mainstream therapeutic language. There are a lot of different ways that we can study how health and wellness is talked about over time. One of the things that we look at is the messaging that comes from the White House and the Ad Council at different times. So some of you may remember Nancy Reagan's Just Say No campaign. For millennials, there was This Is Your Brain on Drugs. Love that it ended with any questions, because I feel like we were like, yeah, we do have some questions here. This new generation coming in grew up with the backdrop of Michelle Obama's Just Move campaign. And this was really focused on nourishment, movement, mindfulness, and this entered kindergarten classrooms. And so just the conversation had really changed. And between 2010 and 2020, more than a dozen documentaries were released about the dangers of factory farming, the dangers of sugar. Sitting became the new smoking. And this idea that if you don't make time for wellness, you'll be forced to make time for illness became a modern mantra. And then you put a pandemic on top of it that put a spotlight on pre-existing conditions. And this trend really accelerated. This has so many impacts on the future of communities and work, but one of the ways in which the workplace has really changed is an introduction of therapeutic language into mainstream conversation. So when we hear words like toxic and burnout and gaslighting, this type of language, this was therapeutic language that has now shifted our vocabulary about how we can describe workplace environments. Now, this we can kind of talk about all day, but I'll wrap it up with this, which is I believe that the fundamental question at the root of the well-being revolution is this question that workers are asking themselves of what am I willing to sacrifice for my job? And every generation is allowed to come in and reevaluate the stories they inherit about their society. And that reevaluation is happening right now, and we have to look at it objectively, right? About 50% of baby boomers are divorced. About 2/3 of them have one or more chronic illnesses. And so it's okay for a new generation to come in and say, all right, do I want to sacrifice my relationships and my health in the name of my work? And if not, what are the other options? And so this can give us some insight into conversations today around work ethic and sacrifice. And the last piece here is around optimization. We are currently exiting our obsession with convenience and replacing it with an obsession with optimization. And just to clarify those meanings, convenience is about involving little trouble or effort, where to make something optimal is to make it as effective, perfect, or useful as possible. And I'll give you an example here. And we can just ignore Peloton's recent stock price. But a stationary at-home bike, obviously super convenient, involves little trouble or effort, it's at your house. The reason that a brand like Peloton was able to be so disruptive in an already crowded market is because they weren't selling convenience, they were selling optimization. They track data about your speed and your strength. They send push notifications to your phone and your watch, not just to help you exercise, but to actually help you advance. And this type of optimized technology, it's permeated culture overall, but it is Gen Z that has grown up with this backdrop of tech that has enabled them to optimize everything from their sleep and their workouts to their nourishment to even their intellect. And this has really transformed some of those baseline expectations about what the world should really look like. And this has transformed our understanding of other trends. When we think about this trend of personalization, we used to think that personalization came from this snowflake effect, that people think they're so special and so unique and they would like their marketplace decisions to reflect back to them their own uniqueness. And earlier this year, I was doing a project for a big vitamins company, and I was interviewing the leaders, and I was asking, what are the big trends that are shaping vitamin sales? And one of the things that kept coming up is they were saying things like, this new generation, they all think they're so special and so unique, they would never just take a trusted multivitamin off the shelf. They want like their own special packets of special vitamins for their own snowflake-like bodies. And I reflected on these conversations because I'm a vitamin taker and I've never purchased an off-the-shelf multivitamin. And it's not because I think I'm some unique snowflake of wonder. It's because I got a blood draw, and then you can see where your deficiencies are, and then you can just take the things that are more optimal for your body. And so this is how optimization has just transformed some of our expectations in this search to make things more effective and more perfect and more useful. The last takeaway that I'll give on the workplace is something that has become very clear, is that when I ask people who did have the opportunity to work from home at all during the pandemic, when I ask, what did you like best about it? The answers are almost always tied to the ability to optimize their own time. They can throw laundry in between meetings, they can do a quick workout, they can go for a quick walk, they can organize their calendar where they can go downstairs and have lunch with their kids. And so our tolerance for a suboptimal use of time is at an all-time low. And the things in the workplace that were sort of annoying in 2019 are driving us absolutely crazy in 2022. And so I would just say that as we think about the future of the workplace, there is this opportunity to look at our processes, our procedures, our norms, and look objectively as we can, without holding on to sacred cows, to figure out where could this be more effective, more perfect, more useful? What could be optimized here? And on the other side, it is a perfect moment for intergenerational mentorship so that the younger generation can also learn about the importance of some of those quote-unquote suboptimal moments as well, where we have that white space in order to do culture building and innovation. And I know we don't have time for questions, and so if anyone does have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to me. To Corrine and her team, I will make sure that a summary of the presentation is sent over. It will be available to all of you with recommended reading and takeaways. If there's one thing that you take away from today, I hope it's that it's not about right or wrong or better or worse. Every generation comes into our communities and they bring something different and something special, something that moves us forward. And it's up to visionary leaders today to see that and to leverage that. Thank you so much for having me.
So thank you, Kim. What a way to close our program. That was very provocative information, and I learned that I am a cusper. And really want to make sure that we give thanks to the program committee to putting today to get together today's amazing program, as well as our wonderful speakers today. And I always have to pause because I continue to be amazed at our remarkable, creative, and capable staff of 3, Corrine Boutros, and our executive team, Kaynell and Martha, for making this event a success every year. So today there was a lot of information shared, and I'd like to say, let's take this as a call for action. All the challenges we've heard of that are confronting Broward County, I really challenge all of us to stand up and do something, get involved, and help us all together make this county the best in the world. It already is on track for that. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.